First off, just to sort of build on one of your points there, that repeated rounds of an unpredictable number. If you're going to have a competitive interaction with someone, do you stab them in the back or do you cooperate? And your starting point is you're never going to see this person again, and they have no means of telling anyone else on earth if you were a jerk or whatever. The only real politic thing that anyone could ever do is don't cooperate, stab them in the back. If you have only one round that you're going to interact with. And then you get this horrible regressive thing that if you're going to interact with them for 2 rounds, what's the logical thing to do on the second round? Stab them in the back. So you've already defaulted into knowing that the second round is going to be non-cooperation. So what do you do in the first round? You already know the second round is a given, so you might as well stab them in the back on the first one. And if there's 3 rounds, you go backwards. And at every one of those points, if you're hyper-rational, no matter how many rounds ahead of you there are, if you know how many there are going to be, the only uber Spockian logical thing to do is to never ever cooperate. Where the breakthrough comes in is when you don't know how many rounds there are in the future. And that's where you get selection for cooperation. That's where you see a world of differences in social species who are migratory versus ones who are not. If I do something nice for this guy, is he going to be around next Tuesday to help me out? Not if he's like a Syrian golden hamster. He's migratory. He's going to be gone. On the other hand, if he's a human living in a sedentary settlement, yeah, maybe if I could trust him or not. So yeah, key point of an unknown number of rounds in the future, because you never know, putting it most cynically, how much of a chance they're going to have in the future to get back at you if you were a jerk right now in the present. So that emphasis on unknown number of rounds, what you allude to is like the poster child, the fruit fly of people who do game theory studies, the prisoner's dilemma, where essentially there's a whole story that goes with it, but you have to decide, are you going to cooperate with someone or are you going to stab them in the back? And the way it works is if you both cooperate, you both get a decent reward. If you both stab each other in the back, you both get punished to a certain extent. But if you manage to get them to cooperate with you, but you stab them in the back, they get a tremendous loss and you get a huge number of brownie points. And conversely, if they've suckered you into being cooperative and then they stabbed you in the back, you're way so this whole world of when do you cooperate and when do you do anything other than that, always within this realm of multiple rounds, but unknown number. So this guy, Robert Axelrod, who's like this senior major figure in sort of political science, teamed up with this evolutionary biologist, W.G. Hamilton, one of the gods in that field. And they said, well, let's talk to a whole bunch of our friends who think seriously about this stuff, and tell them about the prisoner's dilemma and have each one of them tell us what would their strategy be when playing the prisoner's dilemma. How would you do an unknown number of rounds and maximize your wins at the end? And they asked Nobel Peace Prize winners and Mother Teresa and prize fighters and warlords and mathematicians. And they collected just a zillion people's different strategies. And then they ran this round robin tournament on this ancient 1970s computer of just running each strategy against all the other ones, a gazillion rounds, to see which one worked best, which one won. Or in the terms that evolutionary biologists quickly started using, which strategy drove all the others into extinction. And the thing that flattened everybody was you had these people putting in these algorithms and probabilities and fuzzy logic and God knows what. And the one that beat all the others was the simplest one out there, tit for tat. You start off by cooperating. If the other guy is a jerk at some point and stabs you in the back, the next round, you tit for tat him back. You stab him back. If he goes back to cooperating, then you go back to cooperating. You've forgiven him. If he keeps on being a jerk, you keep on being a jerk. And even though what you see is by the person being a jerk, they're always one round ahead of you. And that seems pretty disadvantageous. You're always going to be one step behind the individual stab you in the back. When you get two jerky cheaters together, all they do is constantly stab each other in the back, and they get the worst possible outcome. And what you see with something like that is with tit for tat, if you're a nice cooperative guy and start off with that assumption, you lose the battles with the jerks, but you win the wars. Because cooperators find each other. And this strategy outcompeted everyone, and everyone couldn't believe it because of how simplistic it was. And that was exactly, it was straightforward. It was easy to understand. Its starting point was one of cooperation, giving somebody the benefit of the doubt from the start. It was nonetheless not a sucker. It was punitive. It was capable of retribution. And if the other player who had sinned against them corrected their ways, it was forgiving. And it was as simple, and this outcompeted all of the other ones. And what everyone sort of in the zoology world went about saying at that point is, oh my God, do animals go about tit for tat strategies when they're in competitive circumstances where they've got to decide, am I going to cooperate or am I going to cheat and that sort of thing? Has evolution sculpted optimal competitive cooperative behavior in all sorts of species to solve the prisoner's dilemma problem? And people went and looked, and it turned out, what do you know? Evolution had sculpted exactly that in all sorts of species with phenomenal, interesting findings where if you experimentally manipulate one animal to make it look like they're not reciprocating in something that somebody else just did for them, and everybody punishes them one round afterward and they go back to cooperating again and everyone forgives them, that's tit for tat.